Have you ever scrolled through aircraft listings and found planes so cheap you had to double-check the price? I mean, we're talking certified aircraft for less than the cost of a decent used car. Your first thought might be, what a steal! This is my ticket into aviation. But hold on a second. There's usually a reason why some aircraft sit on the market for months, sometimes years, with price tags that seem too good to be true. Today, we're diving deep into 5 small planes that are really cheap, but that you should probably never buy. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another negative aviation video, hear me out. These aren't necessarily bad aircraft. Some of them were actually quite innovative in their day. But between hidden maintenance costs, parts availability nightmares, handling characteristics that'll keep you up at night, and reputations that have been dragged through the mud for decades, these planes have earned their bargain basement prices for very specific reasons. We're going to break down exactly why each of these aircraft might seem like a dream deal on paper, but could quickly turn into your worst aviation nightmare. And here's the thing, some experienced pilots swear by a couple of these planes. They'll tell you the bad reputation is undeserved, that if you know what you're doing, these aircraft are actually incredible values. And you know what? They might have a point, but for the average pilot, especially someone new to aircraft ownership, these 5 planes come with red flags you need to know about before you wire that deposit. So whether you're a student pilot dreaming of your first plane, a renter tired of scheduling conflicts, or just someone curious about why certain aircraft are priced like lawnmowers, stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what you're getting into with each of these aircraft. And who knows, maybe you'll be that brave soul who sees opportunity where others see warning signs. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll save yourself from an expensive mistake that could sour your love of flying forever. We're ranking these from least problematic to most concerning, so make sure you watch until the end, because number 1 might shock you. It's an aircraft that was actually designed with safety as the top priority, yet it's become one of the most ignored planes in general aviation. Let's jump in. Number 5, Piper PA-28-140 Cherokee. The Cherokee family is legendary in general aviation, reliable, straightforward, and beloved by pilots worldwide. These low-wing trainers and cruisers have introduced countless pilots to the joys of flying and have proven themselves as solid, dependable aircraft over decades of service. But here's the thing, not all Cherokees are created equal. And the PA-28-140, the budget version of the family, is like the forgotten middle child that nobody talks about at family gatherings. You can find a PA-28-140 Cherokee in flying condition for as low as $28,000 to $35,000. That's less than most new cars, and you're getting a certified 4-seat aircraft from a reputable manufacturer. Sounds amazing, right? Well, let's talk about why this particular Cherokee struggles to find buyers despite its pedigree and low price point. The PA-28-140 Cherokee is powered by a Lycoming O320 engine, producing just 150 horsepower. Now, that might sound adequate, but here's where reality hits. This engine is trying to move a 4-seat airframe, and when you actually load it with 4 people, fuel, and baggage, you're going to be seriously disappointed with the performance. In fact, with full fuel and 4 adults, you're likely overweight or pushing the limits of the aircraft's useful load, which typically sits around 865 pounds. The cruise speed tells the whole story. You're looking at about 108 knots on a good day, maybe 115 if you're light and have a tailwind. That's slow, even by trainer standards. The Cessna 172 of the same era will cruise 10 to 15 knots faster, and don't even compare it to the 180 horsepower Cherokee 180 or Archer variants. The performance gap is significant enough that most pilots choose to spend a bit more for substantially better capability. But the performance issues go beyond just cruise speed. The climb rate is anemic, especially on hot days or at higher elevations. You're looking at around 660 feet per minute at sea level under ideal conditions, but take off on a hot summer day from a mountain airport with any significant load, and you'll be sweating as you watch the trees at the end of the runway getting closer. This isn't an aircraft that gives you comfortable performance margins when conditions aren't perfect. The avionics in most PA-28-140s for sale are seriously outdated. We're talking steam gauges from the 1960s and 70s, ancient radios, and navigation equipment that belongs in a museum. Now, you might think, no problem, I'll just upgrade the panel. But here's the brutal truth. A modern GPS navigator costs $5,000 to $8,000 installed. A basic glass panel system, like a Garmin G5 setup, will run you $10,000 to $15,000. An autopilot? Another $10,000 to $15,000 minimum. Before you know it, you've spent as much on avionics as you paid for the airplane, and you're still flying one of the slowest four-seaters out there. The useful load limitation means this aircraft is really a two-person cruiser or a four-person local flyer with minimal fuel. You can't fill the tanks, load 4 adults, and throw bags in the back. You're constantly calculating weight and balance, making compromises about fuel loads versus passenger loads. For most owners, this becomes frustrating quickly, especially when you watch other aircraft in the same price range, plus a bit more offer substantially better capability. Maintenance on the PA-28-140 is generally straightforward, which is one of its few bright spots. The Lycoming 0320 is a bulletproof engine with excellent parts availability and mechanics who know it inside and out. The airframe itself is simple and robust. But here's the catch. Because these aircraft are so cheap, many have been neglected over the years. Deferred maintenance is common, and bringing a neglected Cherokee up to good condition can cost more than the purchase price. The resale market tells the real story. PA-28-140s sit for sale for months, sometimes over a year, while other Cherokee variants sell quickly. Buyers who do their research quickly realize that for just $10,000 to $15,000 more, they can get a Cherokee 180 or Warrior with 180 horsepower, better useful load, higher cruise speeds, and better resale value. The PA-28-140 becomes a hard sell even at its low price point. So who is this aircraft actually good for? Honestly, it's perfect for a time-building pilot who needs something cheap to fly, doesn't care about speed or load capacity, and plans to fly solo or with one passenger most of the time. It's also decent for flight schools in low-altitude areas where the performance limitations won't create safety issues. But for the typical private owner who wants to actually use their aircraft for travel, bring friends along, or have any kind of flexibility, the PA-28-140 Cherokee is a compromise too far, even at bargain prices. Number 4, Cessna 177 Cardinal. The Cessna 177 Cardinal was supposed to be revolutionary, Cessna's bold answer to modernize their lineup and eventually replace the legendary 172 Skyhawk. With its sleek design, cantilever wing with no struts, improved visibility, and more spacious cabin, it looked like the future of general aviation when it was introduced in 1968. Today, you can find early Cardinals starting around $35,000 to $45,000. But despite seeming like a great deal, these aircraft struggle to find buyers, and there are some very good reasons why. Let's start with the elephant in the hangar. The early 177s, those built from 1968 to 1969, had serious performance problems. Cessna equipped them with a 150-horsepower Lycoming 0320 engine, the same engine that powered the lighter Cessna 172. But here's the problem. The Cardinal was heavier than the 172, and that strutless cantilever wing, while beautiful and offering great visibility, was also heavier than the strut-braced wing on the 172. The result? Performance that left pilots shaking their heads. Climb rate was anemic, cruise speed was disappointing, and takeoff performance, especially in hot weather or at altitude, was frankly dangerous. Many early Cardinal owners felt like they'd been sold a bill of goods, and the aviation community quickly labeled the 177 as underpowered and problematic. That reputation, earned in those first 2 years of production, still haunts the Cardinal today, even though later models, with 180 horsepower engines, solved most of the performance issues. In 1970, Cessna responded to the complaints by bumping the engine to 180 horsepower in the 177A and 177B models, and even introduced a retractable gear 177RG variant. These later models actually performed quite well, with cruise speeds of 130, 140 knots and respectable climb rates. But by then, the damage was done. The Cardinal had earned a reputation as Cessna's troubled aircraft, and that stigma has never fully gone away. From a handling perspective, the Cardinal is actually a nice flying airplane. The control response is crisp, visibility is excellent thanks to that high wing position and lack of struts, and the cabin is genuinely more spacious than a 172. Many pilots who actually fly Cardinals regularly prefer them to the Skyhawk. But perception often matters more than reality in aviation, and the perception of the Cardinal remains problematic. Here's where things get expensive. Because the Cardinal was produced in much smaller numbers than the 172, around 4,300 total Cardinals versus over 44,000 Cessna 172s, parts availability and mechanic familiarity become real issues. Many mechanics have worked on dozens or hundreds of 172s, but have rarely touched a Cardinal. That unfamiliarity translates to higher labor costs, as mechanics take longer to diagnose and fix issues. Specialized Cardinal parts, particularly for that unique wing structure, can be expensive and sometimes hard to source. The insurance situation isn't great either. Because of the Cardinal's reputation and relatively small population, some insurance companies charge higher premiums than they would for a comparable 172 or Cherokee. If you're a low-time pilot looking to buy your first aircraft, you might find insurance on a Cardinal to be significantly more expensive than on more common types. Resale value is another concern. When it comes time to sell your Cardinal, you're entering a much smaller market than you would with a 172 or Cherokee. There are simply fewer buyers looking specifically for Cardinals, which means your aircraft will likely sit on the market longer and potentially require price reductions to attract interest. That great deal you got buying it might not seem so great when you're trying to sell it years later. The avionics situation in most affordable Cardinals mirrors the PA-28140. You're looking at outdated panels that need significant investment to bring up to modern standards. And because there are fewer Cardinals out there, finding one that's already been upgraded is harder than with more common types. Now here's the thing, if you can find a later model Cardinal with 180 horsepower, particularly a 127B from the mid-1970s that's been well maintained and has decent avionics, it's actually a good airplane. Some Cardinal owners are fiercely loyal and will tell you it's the best kept secret in general aviation, and they might be right for them. But for the average buyer, especially someone new to ownership, the Cardinal represents more risk and more unknowns than more common alternatives. The bottom line is this. The Cessna 177 Cardinal is an aircraft where you really need to know what you're getting into. Early models should probably be avoided entirely unless you're prepared for disappointing performance. Later models can be good airplanes, but you're buying into a smaller support network, potentially higher maintenance costs, and uncertain resale value. For most pilots, especially first-time buyers, the safer bet is to spend a bit more on a 172 or comparable aircraft with better support and market demand. Number 3. Beechcraft Skipper. The Beechcraft Skipper, officially the Model 77, was Beechcraft's ambitious attempt to compete in the two-seat trainer market dominated by the Cessna 152 and Piper Tomahawk. Introduced in 1979, it was a clean-sheet design featuring a distinctive T-tail, side-by-side seating, and typically Beechcraft quality construction. On paper, it should have been a winner. Today, you can find Skippers for as low as $20,000 to $30,000, sometimes even less. But despite that tempting price tag, very few pilots are buying, and once you understand the full story, you'll probably understand why. The biggest problem with the Beechcraft Skipper isn't the airplane itself, it's actually a reasonably nice flying little trainer. The problem is that Beechcraft built fewer than 312 of them before pulling the plug on production in 1981. Let that sink in. Fewer than 312 aircraft total production run. Compare that to the thousands of Cessna 152s and Piper Tomahawks produced, and you start to see the problem. You're buying into an orphan aircraft with an extremely small population. What does a small production run mean for you as an owner? First and foremost, parts availability becomes a serious concern. While the skipper uses a common Lycoming 0235 engine, which is the same engine in the Cessna 152 and has excellent parts support, the airframe-specific parts are another story. When you need a skipper-specific component, whether it's a door latch, a windscreen, a specific control system part, or any of the dozens of unique pieces that make a skipper, you might be in for a long search and a big bill. The used parts market is thin because there just aren't that many skippers being parted out. And if the part you need isn't available used, you're looking at fabrication or expensive new old stock parts that have been sitting on a shelf for 40 years. I've heard stories of skipper owners waiting months for specific parts, effectively grounding their aircraft for extended periods. That's not a situation most aircraft owners want to deal with. Mechanic familiarity is another huge issue. Most A&P mechanics have worked on dozens of Cessna 152s. It's a bread-and-butter trainer that's everywhere. The Piper Tomahawk, while less common, still has enough of a population that most mechanics have encountered them. But the skipper, many mechanics have never worked on one, have never even seen one in person. That unfamiliarity means longer troubleshooting times, more head-scratching, and ultimately, higher labor bills for you. The pilot community problem is real and often underestimated by new buyers. When you own a common aircraft type like a 172 or Cherokee, you have access to huge online communities, type-specific forums with thousands of active members, type clubs with extensive resources, and a wealth of shared knowledge about maintenance tips, upgrade options, common problems and solutions. The skipper community. It exists, but it's tiny. Finding specific information about a problem you're having might mean waiting days or weeks for someone in the small community to respond, if anyone has encountered that issue before at all. From a flying perspective, the skipper is actually a decent little airplane. Visibility is excellent, the controls are crisp and responsive, and it's generally well behaved throughout the envelope. The T-tail configuration gives it a distinctive look and provides clean airflow over the elevator. The cabin is comfortable for a two-seat trainer, and the build quality shows typical Beechcraft attention to detail. If you could solve the parts and support issues, it would be a fine aircraft. But here's the brutal reality. When something goes wrong with your skipper, and something always goes wrong with aircraft eventually, you're facing an uphill battle that owners of more common types simply don't have to deal with. And when it comes time to sell, you're fishing in the smallest pond imaginable, finding a buyer who specifically wants a Beechcraft skipper, who has the knowledge and willingness to take on an orphan aircraft, and who happens to be looking at exactly the time you're selling. Good luck. The resale value reflects all these concerns. Skippers tend to sell for less than comparable Cessna 152s or Piper Tomahawks, even when they're in better condition. The market has priced in all the risk and hassle of owning an orphan aircraft, so that great deal you're getting on the purchase price, you'll probably take an even bigger haircut when you sell, assuming you can find a buyer at all. For someone looking for a cheap time-building aircraft who has mechanical skills, doesn't mind sourcing parts, and plans to keep it long-term, a skipper might work. But for the typical pilot looking for an affordable entry into aircraft ownership, the Beechcraft skipper represents too many potential headaches. You're better off spending a few thousand more on a Cessna 152 with infinitely better support, parts availability, and resale market. Number 2, Grumman AA-1 Yankee. Now we're getting into controversial territory. The Grumman AA-1 Yankee, along with its variants like the AA-1A, AA-1B and AA-1C, is an aircraft that inspires fierce loyalty among its owners, and absolute terror among many flight instructors. This small, sporty two-seater from the 1970s can be found for as low as $25,000 to $35,000, and it seems like an incredible deal. Fast for its class, efficient, and with that cool Grumman sliding canopy and sleek lines. But before you get seduced by the low price and sporty looks, you need to understand why this aircraft has earned one of the most controversial reputations in general aviation. Let's start with what the Yankee does well. It's legitimately fast for a two-seat trainer. Cruise speeds of 115, 125 mph are significantly faster than a Cessna 150 or 152. The sliding canopy provides an open-air experience and excellent visibility. The handling is responsive and sporty. It feels like a little sports car in the air. Fuel consumption is low, and the simple systems mean lower maintenance costs. The Yankee has a loyal following of owners who absolutely love their aircraft and will defend them passionately. So why is it on this list? The handling characteristics are where things get spicy. The Grumman AA-1 Yankee is what pilots call unforgiving. It has very light control forces and responds quickly to pilot inputs, which sounds great until you realize that it also means it requires constant attention and precise control. The aircraft has virtually no adverse yaw, which means it doesn't naturally want to coordinate turns. New pilots who aren't actively working the rudder can easily find themselves in uncoordinated flight, which can lead to accelerated stalls or worse. The stall characteristics are, let's say, interesting. The Yankee doesn't give you much warning before it stalls, and when it does stall, it brakes sharply, often dropping a wing suddenly. This is in stark contrast to trainers like the Cessna 150, which stalls gently and gives you plenty of warning. If you're not prepared for the Yankee's sharp stall brake and you react incorrectly, you can find yourself in a spin very quickly. And here's the concerning part. The Yankee's spin recovery, while doable, is more difficult than in traditional trainers. The landing gear is another major issue. The Yankee has a very stiff, rigid landing gear with very little give. In aircraft like Cessnas, the spring steel gear absorbs a lot of the impact from less than perfect landings. The Yankee's gear doesn't do that. If you land hard, you're going to know it, and more importantly, the airframe is going to know it. Hard landings in Yankees can cause firewall damage, skin buckling, and structural issues that are expensive to repair. The aircraft absolutely demands smooth, precise landings every single time. The combination of unforgiving handling, tricky stalls, and unforgiving landing gear has led many flight schools to ban the Yankee from their fleets. Many insurance companies charge significantly higher premiums for Yankees, especially for low-time pilots. Some insurance companies simply won't insure low-time pilots in AA-1s at all. That should tell you something about the perceived risk. But here's where it gets really controversial. Experienced pilots who know the Yankees' characteristics and fly it regularly often have no problems. They'll tell you the aircraft's reputation is overblown, that it simply requires proper training and respect. They point out that accidents are almost always pilot error, not aircraft deficiencies. And they're not entirely wrong. The Yankee isn't inherently dangerous. It just has no tolerance for sloppy piloting. The problem is, if you're buying your first aircraft, you're probably not an experienced pilot yet. You're still building skills, still learning, still making the occasional mistake. In a Cessna 150, you can make a mistake, and the aircraft will often forgive you. In a Yankee, mistakes get expensive quickly or worse. For a low-time pilot, this aircraft can be genuinely dangerous without proper training and deep respect for its characteristics. Parts availability is okay, better than the Skipper but not as good as Cessnas or Pipers. The Grumman gang community is active and helpful, which is a plus. Maintenance is generally straightforward, though that bonded aluminum construction means corrosion inspection is critical and repair of any skin damage requires specialized skills not all mechanics possess. The resale market for Yankees is split. Pilots who know and love them will pay fair prices. But you're selling to a much smaller pool of potential buyers than you would with a more conventional trainer. Many potential buyers will be scared off by the reputation, fair or not. Here's the bottom line on the Grumman AA-1 Yankee. If you're an experienced pilot who wants a fun, fast, efficient two-seater and you're willing to stay proficient and respect the aircraft's demands, it can be a great airplane. But if you're a low-time pilot, if you don't fly frequently enough to stay sharp, or if you want a forgiving aircraft that won't punish small mistakes, stay far away from the Yankee. The low purchase price is tempting, but the potential costs, both financial and otherwise, are very real. Number 1. Erco Aircoupe 415. Here we are at number 1, and I'm going to surprise some of you. The Erco Aircoupe 415 is one of the most innovative, safety-focused aircraft designs in general aviation history. It was literally engineered to be spin-proof and stall-proof. It has no rudder pedals. The ailerons and rudder are interconnected and controlled through the yoke alone, making coordination automatic. It was designed to be the safest, easiest airplane to fly. So why is it number 1 on a list of planes you should never buy? Because despite all those safety innovations, it's an aircraft that comes with so many practical limitations and concerns that most pilots should stay away. Let's start with the good stuff, because the Aircoupe really was revolutionary. Designed in the 1930s and produced from the 1940s through the 1960s in various forms, the Aircoupe eliminated many of the ways pilots hurt themselves. No rudder pedals means you can't get yourself into an uncoordinated situation. The control system makes spins virtually impossible. The aircraft was designed to be stall-resistant, and even if you do stall it, it just mushes down rather than braking sharply. For its era, this was brilliant thinking, addressing the leading causes of general aviation accidents. You can find Aircoupes for $15,000 to $25,000, sometimes even less. That's cheaper than most cars. For someone who just wants to buzz around locally on nice days, it seems like an absolute steal. But here's where reality crashes the party. The Aircoupe is slow, really slow. Cruise speeds of around 90-100 mph mean you're plodding along while other aircraft zip past you. That's fine for local flying, but if you ever want to actually travel anywhere, you're going to spend a very long time getting there. The useful load is minimal, typically around 450-500 pounds. That means you, a passenger, some fuel, and basically nothing else. Forget baggage, forget full fuel with 2 people aboard. You're constantly making weight compromises. The lack of rudder pedals, while brilliant for preventing spins, creates significant limitations. Crosswind capability is severely limited because you can't use rudder to fight a crosswind on landing. The Aircoupe can handle gentle crosswinds, but anything significant and you're grounded. This massively restricts when and where you can fly. If there's a strong crosswind at your airport, you're not going flying that day, period. The vintage nature of these aircraft means you're dealing with 60, 80-year-old systems and structures. Corrosion is a major concern, and thoroughly inspecting an Aircoupe requires knowledge of its unique construction. Parts availability is hit or miss. Some parts are available, some require fabrication, some are unobtainium. The Continental engines used are generally well supported, but airframe-specific parts can be challenging. Here's a huge practical problem. Many insurance companies won't insure Aircoupes or charge very high premiums. Why? Because despite the safety design, Aircoupes have a higher than average accident rate. How is that possible in an aircraft designed to be so safe? Because the limitations of the design, particularly the crosswind limitations, combined with old aircraft that may not be well maintained, lead to situations where pilots get into trouble. Ground loops, runway excursions, and loss of control on landing are common Aircoupe accidents. The type certificate changed hands multiple times over the decades, and various models were produced with different features. Some Aircoupes have rudder pedals added as a modification, some don't. Some have electrical systems, some don't. Some have starters, some are hand prop only. Finding parts and documentation for your specific variant can be a challenge. Mechanics who are truly familiar with Aircoupes are increasingly rare as these aircraft age. The resale market is extremely limited. You're selling to a very specific buyer, someone who wants an inexpensive vintage aircraft for local flying and who understands and accepts all the limitations. That's a small pool, and it's getting smaller as these aircraft age. When you want to sell, expect it to take a very long time and expect to take a significant loss. The pilot community is small but dedicated. There are coupe clubs and resources, but nothing like the support network for more common types. Finding local help or advice can be difficult depending on where you live. Here's my take on the coupe. It's a fascinating piece of aviation history with genuinely innovative design features. For someone who wants a cheap vintage aircraft for local flying on calm days, who has the mechanical knowledge to maintain an old aircraft, who doesn't care about going anywhere or flying in challenging conditions, and who understands they're buying something more like a flying antique than a practical aircraft, an coupe might work. But for anyone else, for anyone who wants to actually use their aircraft as practical transportation, who wants the flexibility to fly in various conditions, or who wants something with decent resale value, the coupe is a hard pass. The bottom line is that the coupe's innovative safety features, while admirable, don't overcome its numerous practical limitations. It's slow, limited in capability, challenging to insure, hard to maintain, and difficult to resell. The rock-bottom prices reflect all of these issues. You get what you pay for, and with an coupe, you're paying very little and getting an aircraft with very limited utility. So there you have it, 5 aircraft that seem like incredible deals until you dig into the details. From the forgotten Cherokee 140 with its anemic performance, to the well-intentioned but problematic Cardinal, the orphaned Skipper, the unforgiving Yankee, and finally the fascinating but ultimately impractical coupe. Each of these aircraft has attractive purchase prices, but each comes with significant concerns that explain why they're priced so low. The pattern you've probably noticed is that cheap aircraft are cheap for a reason. Performance limitations, parts availability problems, difficult handling characteristics, small support communities, or some combination of all of these factors. Aviation is already expensive enough without buying into an aircraft that's going to cost you more in the long run through higher maintenance, higher insurance, or poor resale value. Now, does that mean you should never buy any of these aircraft? Not necessarily. If you're an experienced pilot who knows exactly what you're getting into, who has done thorough research, who has the mechanical skills or financial resources to deal with the unique challenges, and who has realistic expectations about what the aircraft can do, some of these might work for you. But for the average pilot, especially someone new to ownership, these 5 aircraft represent more risk than reward. If you're looking to buy your first aircraft, my advice is to focus on the most common, widely supported types. Yes, you'll pay more upfront for a Cessna 172, a later Cherokee with more power, or a Cessna 150, but you'll have better parts support, easier insurance, more mechanics who know the type, a larger pilot community to draw on, and much better resale value when it's time to move on. Sometimes the safe, boring choice is safe and boring for very good reasons. What do you think? Do you agree with this list, or do you think one of these aircraft is actually a hidden gem? Have you owned any of these types? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. And if this video helped you avoid a potentially expensive mistake, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future content. Until next time, fly safe. And remember, in aviation, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.